Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And I am your host, Julie Jester Gayheart, and you have found your way to episode number 155 and the second episode in our Appalachian Trail section hiker series that I have been doing over the last couple episodes and will continue to do here for the next several weeks. And you guys, I want to go ahead and get right into this episode, but I do have a couple updates for everybody. I've been playing around with the YouTube channel. So what I've done is I've added a playlist for these particular episodes, and it's the Appalachian Trail Section Hiker Series playlist. So you won't have to search all around the channel. You'll just be able to go to the playlist. And right now you're going to see Georgia, which was last week's episode. And then today is added the Smokies. So there's that. There is an official playlist now on the YouTube channel just for this particular series. In addition to that, I was also messing around with the checklist, because for those of you that watched or listened to last week's episode, you guys know I created a checklist for Georgia. And I am also creating a checklist for each and every one of these episodes. So you've got Georgia, you've got the Smokies. I'm excited about this series and adding that all together for you guys. And I guess I'm excited because, as you know, I'm an educator by day, and I love teaching, researching, looking at logistics, and giving information. So all of this will be going on through June. And before we officially get started, I want to thank our friend and partner of these episodes, this particular series on the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, and that is Hiker Metals. You guys know you can go to hikermetals.com, and Wim, the owner of Hiker Metals, has done a phenomenal job of creating metals specifically for hikers once they complete their long-distance trails. I know I showed this last week, but this is the new Appalachian Trail metal that you can get through Hiker Metals. And you guys, it's really thick and it's pretty heavy. You can help Wim out over at hikermetals.com at that discount code. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. It's real easy. It's also in the show notes. 20% off. The discount code Jester in all caps will make that happen for you. So you guys, you can give these as gifts. You can give them to the hiker friends in your life. They just make wonderful gifts and wonderful mementos. So we are going to get on with it. We've got a nice little crew in the chat right now. If you're in the chat, please let me know. Let me know who you are, where you're from, and maybe why you tuned into these episodes and your interest in section hiking various areas along the Appalachian Trail. And we are going to go ahead and get right to it. You guys know it. You know what's coming next. If you are watching the video version, I just popped up the itinerary or our agenda for the day. And if you are listening to the audio version, I'm just going to go ahead and encourage you to come over to YouTube and check out the video version, because you guys, it's like, honestly, it's like going to class with Jester. We've got agendas. We've got websites pulled up. You can't really see my hands as I'm talking. And we've got screens. We've got things for you to look at and reference. So real quick, the title of today's agenda is Section Hiking the Appalachian Trail in the Smokies. And last week, you guys know I mentioned we went over more than 5, but the key component to last week were the 5 tools to success, which were utilizing the AT guide, having far out on your phone, should you register your hike, do you need to register your hike, and where to connect with any Appalachian Trail updates at any time during the year. So those 5 tools to success, if you missed out on that, where we went to each one of those in detail, you could always go back and check out last week's episode, or I should say episode number 154. There are 71-ish miles of official AT trail that go through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And you guys, besides the Whites, I get a lot of questions on hiking the Whites in New Hampshire. And that is one of our series in the future. The second most requested or various questions that I get are about hiking through the Smokies on the AT. So we're going to hit all that today. And you guys, that starts off with the permit system. So a permit is required to hike through, and I'm going to switch over my screen and pull up here in a second. Let me say this first. So it is different. So mark this down, make a notation. It is a different permit if you are going through the park as a section hiker versus a through hiker permit. So let me say that again, because this is very important, and this is where people get confused. Number one, you have to have a permit, but the style of permit that you get depends on a various number of factors, and that is if you're going through as a section hiker or if you're going through as a through hiker, and we're going to define what those are, in fact, right now. So I'm going to flip over here. So our first screen is the Great Smoky Mountains backcountry permits. And let me go ahead in the chat real quick. We've got Robin from South Alabama. She says, I love your podcast. I've learned so much from you and your guest. Thank you, Robin. Appreciate you being here. And Alonda says she's here because all she needs is another darn trail to hike. Well, Alonda, we're here for you. Appreciate y'all being here and learning and absorbing what's going on as a section hiker as we go through the Smokies. A permit is required, and it's different permits if you are a section hiker versus a through hiker going through the park. So the first website you want to go to is the Great Smoky Mountains backcountry permits. And if you go to the checklist, it is hyperlinked for you all to get here. This is your first stop. I would say this is your first stop, whether you are going to section hike at the park or through hike the park, because this website is going to give you a lot of information. And we're also going to be talking about parking within the park, because all of that has changed as well. So you want to pull up the Great Smoky Mountains backcountry permits. A general backcountry permit is going to cost you $8 per night each night you stay in the park, where a through hiker permit is $40, one-shot deal. They're going all the way through the park, $40. And I did notice here that a maximum is $40. So if you get to the point 5, 6, 7 nights, or however many nights you're going to take to go through the park, the maximum you're going to pay as a section hiker is $40. And it looks like you are up to 7 nights on one permit. So as a section hiker, $8 a night. Some of you might go through the park in 5 nights. Some of you might go through the park, if you're very aggressive, 4 nights. That would be a very aggressive itinerary. And at the maximum, it's going to cost you $40. Yes, you can make reservations for you and up to 8 people. So if you and some girlfriends or guy friends or whoever is going on the trail with you, if you got a couple people going, one person can be the permit holder of that permit. I've done that several times. And yeah, so what you do, the other thing I wanted to let you guys know on this website, very important. So once you make your reservations, it's very important to check back because sometimes the roads close. There's one major road that goes through the Smokies. Depending on what time of year you're going to be hiking through the park, you could be dealing with weather. You could be dealing with shelters closing because of bear activity. And I've had that happen to me twice. When you make shelter reservations, the rangers in the backcountry offices, they know you're going through the park and they know where you are. And I've gotten phone calls before my itinerary was supposed to start because a shelter that I wanted to stay at was closed due to bear activity. So I had to rearrange my itinerary, but they will call you and let you know. And if you're a section hiker, you're going to click, if I can say that right, you are going to click begin reservation. And then it is going to take you through the process. You'll pick your shelters that you want to stay in. You will pick various campsites because if you don't want to stay in a shelter, there are some campsites you can stay in. And you can begin to create your itinerary. And before this episode's over, I'm going to give you guys my itinerary that I have used twice going through the park. So first step as a section hiker, you are going to go to the Great Smoky Mountains Backcountry Permit site. You're going to read all the information on that website. And then you are going to begin to create your itinerary and go from there. And you guys, if you set yourself up for success on that itinerary from the beginning, it will allow you to plan and prepare for the rest of your trip. Trust me and believe me that it is the very first thing you need to do. And then you can plan accordingly because everything else revolves around that. Your resupply, where you're going to park your car, and all the things that follow once you've created that itinerary, you have that permit in hand, and you are ready to go. And one of the things I wanted to show you is there is a little bit different of a process if you are a thru hiker. And I want to define this for everybody. So a thru hiker is someone, because it can get a little sticky, is an individual that the Smokies considers a thru hiker an individual that has hiked 50 miles before the park, before you enter the park at Fontana Dam or on the north end, Davenport Gap. 50 miles before you enter the park and 50 miles, you're going to hike an additional 50 miles after you exit the park. That is what the park considers a thru hiker. So an individual that is hiking 50 miles before the park and your plan is to hike 50 miles after the park, you can get a one permit allowance, and that is $40, and you're not bound to particular shelters like you would be on a section hiker permit. So if you're out doing a long section, say you started at Springer and you're going to go to Hot Springs and you got to go through the park actually considers you a thru hiker and you will pay a one-time fee and you don't have to worry about staying and being somewhere on a particular night like you would if you are only going to start and go through the park and that is your section hike. So I hope I've made that clear. Let me know in the chat if I'm making that clear. So there's two different styles. A section hiker permit is a backcountry permit where you're going to spend about 7 days going through the park. A thru hiker permit is a one-time fee of $40, and you have to hike 50 miles before you enter the park, 50 miles after you exit the park, and go from there. So hopefully I have made that permit system clear. Thank you, Stella. Stella says that is making sense. So you guys, the very first thing, I cannot emphasize this enough, in our 21 key logistics is getting that itinerary correct, selecting the proper permit, and going from there, and then you will be extremely successful. So we've covered basically the permit system, and now we got to get into this year, the Smokies started parking fees. And this really affects those of you that are driving yourself. You're not going to get dropped off. You got to figure out the logistics of where you're going to put your car, because anywhere you park now within the park boundaries, there are parking fees. You have to get a parking pass. And the place you're going to go to for that, See, now it says parking tag required beginning March 1st, 2023. And there's a little video you can watch on it. I think it's their campaign within the park is called Park It Forward. And the reason that it's key to get your permit first, because you're going to know how many days it's going to take to go through the park. And then as a section hiker, more than likely, you're not going to get a daily permit. You're not going to get a weekly, or you might get a weekly permit, but then you may have to look at, how am I going to go through the park? Is it going to benefit me to go ahead and get the annual parking permit? These are things that all go into part of your logistics. And I believe they have right here this map that you guys can see on the screen. These are various areas where you can pick up your parking permit. You can also get the tag online. They'll send it to you. Another thing you have to think about. So if you get the tag online, don't wait till the day before because you're not going to have it if you plan on parking your car there. So plan accordingly. They have a FAQ section. Any question you have, they've got it. But the best thing to do is, you guys, is to check that information and make sure, based on your itinerary that you came up with and how many days that you are planning to go through the park, that you just look and say, hey, it benefits me to go ahead and buy a parking tag because I'm going to be back here a couple times. There's multiple things that I want to do. So these are the many considerations that it takes to go through the park as a section hiker. And you guys, one of the reasons I really wanted to do this is because it seems like it can get complicated, but it's really not. Once you plan your itinerary, once you plan what you're going to do, and once you plan where you need to be as far as your car, where you're starting your hike, where you're ending your hike, all of this will come together for you, and it'll all make sense, especially at the end of this episode. So once you guys get your permit, there are permit boxes at the beginning of the section on the AT and at the end of the section. So at Fontana Dam, there's a permit box. You're going to put, the permits come in 2-ply or 3-ply. I can't remember. You're going to rip one off. You're going to put one in the beginning because, you guys, this allows the rangers to know where you are in the park, what your potential itinerary is. Even if you're going through as a thru hiker, you're going to rip off part of your itinerary and put it in that box because then they'll know you're in the park. Same thing on the other end. When you get ready to exit the park, you are going to put your exit ticket or your second, you're going to rip it off again and you're going to put your second one there. And so they know you are exiting the park. And you guys, the rangers do collect these things. They do try to keep account of what's happening in the park because, sadly, the rangers have to do several rescues per year at the park because hikers are not prepared. Another reason why I want to do these episodes, so you guys will be prepared as you go through the park. The one thing you don't want to do, don't go through the park without a permit. I know there's people out there that say, oh, don't worry about it. You could go through the park without a permit. You don't have to worry about it. Don't do that, you guys. I have been through the park on the AT, I think I added up last night, almost 5 times. And every single time I have been in the park, around the park, somehow I always end up with a ranger at one of my shelters, meeting a ranger during the day, and they have always asked for the permit. And you don't want to get caught going through the park without a permit because it is a fine. They can fine you. All of that information will be on that website. But you guys, just don't do that. It's a national park. It is the most visited national park, and we just want to adhere to the rules of what they have going on in the park, you guys. And we want to take care of ourselves as hikers and be good stewards. So now that we've got the permit process out of the way and you know in your brain, and now you're looking at, okay, the park, the length of the park on the AT is 71-ish miles. I say that because things vary. So in your mind, when you enter at Fontana and you exit, and everything I talk about today, we're just going to assume you're going to go north through the park. Obviously, I know you could go south. You could split things up. But for the purposes of what we're going to talk about today, we're just going to assume we're all going to go north through the park. which is 71-ish miles. And you're going to put in at Fontana Dam, and you're going to go north, and your exit point is going to be Davenport Gap. This is the way you can look at it for mileage and roads. So you've got 31 miles, and then you can resupply potentially. You've got a 9-mile stretch, and then you can resupply, and then you've got an additional 31-mile stretch. So 31 miles, 9 miles, and then another 31 miles. And your road options are going to be at the beginning, at the southern end of the park. You've got the Fontana area. That's what it's known as. You've got, after the first 31 miles, you're going to hit Klingman's Dome. So in between Klingman's Dome and Newfound Gap is a 9-mile stretch. So there is a road at Klingman's Dome, and there is a road at Newfound Gap. And then once you get to Newfound Gap, it's another 31 miles-ish to get to Davenport Gap, which is your next road and out of the park. So as you're thinking about your itinerary, you've got 31 miles, a 9-mile stretch between Klingman's Dome and Newfound Gap, where you've got 2 roads. You've got Klingman's Dome Road. You got to be careful about Klingman's Dome Road because it's closed a certain time of year. So if you plan on going through the Smokies in the late fall, you got to watch out. You got to look at those road closures because you will not be able to get up to Klingman's Dome. And then that 9-mile in between Klingman's Dome, Newfound Gap. And Newfound Gap is huge because you'll notice on the checklist, that is the road. You're going to get down to a famous part or a famous point in the park at Newfound Gap. You're going to go into shock, you guys, when you get down to Newfound Gap and you've been in the woods since Fontana, which is going to be roughly 40 miles if you don't get off at Klingman's Dome. It is like the wide world of Disney every time I've been to Newfound Gap. And you come out all wild-eyed and you're like ready for food and you're ready to get a ride down into Gatlinburg because you're starving to death and you need a resupply. And the key component of Newfound Gap, you guys, it is really easy for shuttle drivers to get up to Newfound Gap and pick you up. And it's really easy, if you don't want to use a shuttle driver, probably more than likely to get a hitch down into Gatlinburg because all the tourists are up from Gatlinburg and they're taking their pictures and they're realizing they're standing on the amazing Appalachian Trail. So Newfound Gap area. So if you only want to resupply once, you want to start at Fontana and you want to get to Newfound Gap, you're looking at 3 or 4 days. You're going to go down into Gatlinburg and get ready. When you get down into Gatlinburg, there's an NOC outfitter there. And for those of you that have not been to Gatlinburg, you're going to be wide-eyed again because you're going to go from 1 or 2 people a day in the woods to, whoa, you feel like you're at Disney and all the tourists at all the hotels and all the resupply you can find. And it's an experience. So if you are section hiking and you want to absorb all the experience that you want or ever needed or don't want, you got to go down into Gatlinburg. And the NOC outfitter is a really cool outfitter to go visit. Add that to your list of places to go. If you don't want to stay in Gatlinburg, you can always go down to Gatlinburg, resupply, and get the heck out of there and come back up. And you guys, it'll be easy to get a hitch back up or a shuttle. I know that the NOC does shuttles to and from Gatlinburg. I would get in contact with them and see what they have to offer. But I do know 100% that you can resupply there. And you guys, that is really, if you don't plan on going all the way through the park, Gatlinburg is pretty much the only place you can actually go into town and resupply. And where you go into town, you can go at Klingman's Dome, but it's going to be a longer shuttle and it's going to be harder to hitch a ride at Klingman's Dome versus Newfound Gap. Now, it can be done, but I would go for it at Newfound Gap. I've known section hikers that go all the way through, they carry all their food, and I've known section hikers to kind of split it up. So they do the 40-ish miles, go down to Gatlinburg, have your wonderful experience down in Gatlinburg, and then the next day, spend the night in Gatlinburg, The next day, come back up and do the 31-ish miles and head your way out of the park down into Davenport Gap. And basically, Davenport Gap is that area where you come out of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and you are out of the park. So I-40 is actually another decent parking area if you are looking at what I'm going to talk about here shortly, is a place to maybe park your car. So we've talked about resupply options. Another thing I want to add on here is, and I forgot to get mine out, I've got a couple of these. They're really beneficial to have, and that is a Smokies 900 miler map. And you guys, you can get the 900 miler map for $1 at any one of the visitor centers within the park. You could even go online and buy one, and I think they'll send it to you. Buy a couple. I think that's what I did. I went online and bought like 10 and handed them out to the people that were hiking with me. And the number one benefit of having the dollar map with you, and it weighs nothing, just throw it in your pack, is if something happens and you need to get out of the park, it is going to have every single side trail option, shelter, campsite within the park, within that radius of the park, and you'll have that accessible and very readable and very understandable map with you. So I do recommend taking the dollar map with you. I meant to get mine out to show you guys, but you could go on the very first website that is on the checklist and you can get your map. If anybody is in the chat and you guys have questions, please let me know. I know this is a lot of information to absorb, a lot to take in. And even if you have questions, if you are watching this at a later date than the live version, please put your questions in the comments. I do read the comments. I will answer those questions. But let's talk about vehicle placement for a minute. So vehicle placement as a section hiker can get tricky. And because there's no easy way to get around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in a car. So they have one road that cuts all the way through the middle of the park, and you can see that road on the dollar map. And then the ends of the park, you've got Fontana and you've got Davenport Gap or I-40. And to get to any one of those ends, if you're in a car, you're looking minimally at a 2.5 hour ride. I know a lot of people will like to put a vehicle halfway through, which would be Clingman's Dome or Newfound Gap. Me personally, you may want to put a car at Newfound Gap because some of you out there section hiking may split the park up two different ways. You may go out in one section and go from Fontana to Newfound Gap. Or, as they say, if you want to go downhill, you want to go south, you could park a car at Fontana, get a shuttle ride back to Newfound Gap, and then hike the 40 miles back to your car. And the key of all of this, you guys, is you always want to hike to your car. To me, it just helps my mind at ease. Hey, I'm hiking to my car. I don't have to rely on anybody at the end of the hike. And if you're going to go through the park, going north, my recommendation is, I've done this 3 times and I've been dropped off once, is, let me go back to the checklist. You are going to want to use your hostels and your shuttle drivers. And this coincides on the checklist. If you see under where it says Fontana Hilton, you'll see I've got the Fontana Village, which is an option at the southern end of the park. So if you're wanting to go south through the park, you may want to park your car at Fontana and get a shuttle up to Davenport Gap. Or if you want to do what I did, I have utilized Standing Bear Hostel. So the day before I go to do my hike, I drive to Standing Bear. I park my car at Standing Bear. I spend the night at Standing Bear. I get up the next morning and I get a shuttle from Standing Bear Hostel, 2.5 hour ride all the way down to Fontana, and I start my hike. So let me say that again. So I leave my car at Standing Bear, which means the whole week for 7 days, I'm hiking north toward my vehicle, which is what you want to do. And Standing Bear, I know 100% that they will do shuttles. They will let you keep your car there, and they will work with you. So the one thing you want to do as a section hiker, if you're going to utilize the shuttles, if you don't have anybody with you that's going to take you and do all this for you, is you want to give them advance notice. You don't want to call them 2 or 3 days before. You want to call them as you're planning. Actually, you want to call them before you get your permit, before you click that final button. And I want to say one more thing about Standing Bear is that individuals that are out on long section hikes, you're going to get that thru hiker permit. Maybe you've going from Springer to Standing Bear. People do that as well. The Smokies does not allow dogs. Let me say that again. The Smokies, you cannot take your dog through the Smokies. And Standing Bear has kennels for dogs. So keep that in mind. There is another hostel that I wanted to mention. The hostel is called the Discerning Hiker. And there is a link to their website on the checklist. And the Discerning Hiker is new to me. I have not used them. I have only used Standing Bear. But you guys, it looks like a great place. It's another option. It says on their website that they do shuttles. So keep that in mind. You've got a couple options. And here's the thing, you guys. If you call one hostel and they are not able to accommodate you, I guarantee it that they will recommend you to either another hostel, another shuttle driver, another business that will help and accommodate you getting through successfully on your hike. Before we round out the end here, I want to look at some comments of some things that are said in the chat. Stella says, if you park at Newfound Gap or Klingman's Dome, get there early. Lots of traffic and the spaces fill up, especially on weekends with nice weather. That is so true. Newfound Gap, you guys, if you have not been there, that parking area, because the Appalachian Trail, you pop out, you're going to hit the road, and you have to go through that parking area to continue on the AT. That, in and of itself, is an experience. And it looks like we've got Daniel from Canada. So, hey, Daniel, appreciate you joining us. And as you guys come and go in the chat, like I said, if you've got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will answer them as I go. Okay, so pretty much we've gone over the permits, where the roads are, your options as far as resupply, which is not a lot. The end of the park, what's available there, the southern end, the northern end, the hostels, what to utilize. And the big thing about this, I can't emphasize enough, is number one, get your permit. Number two, get the right permit. And number three, always hike toward your car. So if you get dropped off, always hike towards your car. And the next things I want to hit are some fun things, some places not to miss, some myths or some things that go around in the hiker world about various areas on the trail or the shelters. And the first one is Klingman's Dome. So Klingman's Dome is not only the highest point in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but it is the highest point on the Appalachian Trail. So you will hit a monumental point when you get to Klingman's Dome. So please, please, please take the time to step, if you're going north, you're going to step right off of the trail. You'll see the dome and go up to the dome. And you guys, if you get a clear day on Klingman's Dome, it is incredible. It is amazing. You can see north. You can see Max Patch. You can look south back all the way down to the Georgia Appalachians and probably beyond on a clear day. And there is nothing like coming off the AT, knowing you've been on the trail 3 or 4 days, absorbing the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and coming upon Klingman's Dome. And again, you're going to be in shock because there's probably going to be a lot of people there huffing and puffing to go from the parking lot up to the dome, which is a mile. And you might get some trail magic there. You never know. Don't pass up the dome. Go up, go to the top, take a look. The next highlight, you guys, is Newfound Gap, and we've talked about that. Newfound Gap is an experience in and of itself. That's all I can say. Yeah, Alonda says Klingman's Dome is absolutely gorgeous. And here's the other thing about Klingman's Dome. Thank you, Alonda. You reminded me. It is the western terminus of the Mountains to Sea Trail. So you will see a sign that actually says Mountains to Sea Trail in addition to the Appalachian Trail. So all my MST hikers out there, it is the western terminus of the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is another reason to go up to the top of the dome there. Going here on the checklist, you got Newfound Gap. I don't know if I can talk about that anymore. Oh, one thing I wanted to cover are shelter rules at campsites. So there's a lot of rumors out there, you guys, like, oh, I have to stay in the shelters. I can't tent. And yeah, that's true, but it's not as bad as people make it seem. So the shelters technically in the Smokies, you're supposed to sleep in the shelters and they hold 12 people. Okay. We all know that's not realistic. The park knows that's not realistic. So the way that it works is if you are a section hiker going through the park, they want you to stay in the shelter. And if any thru hikers come through and there's more than 12 people at that shelter, the thru hikers can stay in their tents. That's kind of the way it works. But you guys, every time I've been at a shelter, it has been great. We've packed, 20-something people at a shelter because it was pouring down the rain and you just turn it into a big party. I've never had an issue at a shelter where people, didn't accommodate other hikers. You end up being family for that night at the shelter and hanging out and all wonderful things happen. It's not that bad. Most of the time, you're going to be in there 6 or 7 nights. I mean, that's really nothing in the grand scheme of things. And if the shelters fill up, the thru hikers have the opportunity first. I should say that. If you got a thru hiker permit to use your tent and then, say, hey, Jester, I'm there as a section hiker and a thru hiker really wants to stay in the shelter, I'll be like, okay, I'll stay in my tent, no problem, because that's what I prefer anyway. And you guys, it all kind of works out like that. It really works out like that all the way through the park. Various things. You guys will find out all the hikers are very accommodating. I've never met a bad hiker at the park, and I've never met a mean ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's been all good for me. And like I said, I've been through there several times. Bear canisters are not required. They are not required. Each shelter and campsite in the Smoky Mountains National Park, they have bear hanging pulley systems at each one of the shelters. So you could take your bear bag. But the key is, you guys, hang your food. 100% hang your food and encourage everyone in the shelter to hang your food. I will say this too. I believe, yes, every time I've been through the Smokies, I have seen bears. One night at Molly's Ridge, which is the first shelter that you come to out of going north out of Fontana, which is 9 miles north, it was pouring down the rain and it was like hiker midnight, which, 7:30, 8 o'clock. We were all hanging out in the shelter in our sleeping bags, trying to get warm. And right as the sun went down, I'm serious, you guys, every single one of us at the same time, we saw this. I mean, she had to have been 300 or 400 pound bear, just literally walk right in front of the shelter. And we were like, hey, bear, and making noise and everything. That did not affect her at all. In fact, she went past the shelter and then she came back and she was hanging out underneath the bear cables where her food were. We were just waiting for her to somehow climb up on that thing. And you guys, what the most hilarious thing about that story is all of us, we just passed out watching that bear. Unbelievable. We all woke up the next morning and we were like, did she go anywhere? What happened? Let's see what Boots says. Per the National Park Service, currently at this time, based on our COVID adaptive operations plan, those with a valid backcountry permit are authorized to use a tent or a hammock in the area outside the shelter. Good to know. So Boots on the Trail says, per the National Park Service, at this time, based on our COVID adaptive operations plan, those with a valid backcountry permit are authorized to use a tent or hammock in the area outside of the shelter. That is awesome. But I will say with that, there are not a ton of places to tent at some of these shelters because you got to keep in mind on either end of the park is a climb. So you're climbing up and then you're going to be on the ridge all the way through the park. And some of these shelters, depending on your itinerary, there's not a lot of places to put a tent. If you're a hammocker, you'll probably be good to go. But that is good information. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so here we're going to get to some nitty gritty. I'm going to give you guys the shelters that I've stayed at, and the itinerary works. It's done very well for me. So Molly's Ridge, and this is all going north. So Molly's Ridge shelter is roughly 9.5, 10 miles from Fontana, depending on where you start at Fontana. And then the next day is Derrick Knob, which from Molly's Ridge to Derrick Knob, you're looking at 11.5. So you would go from Derrick Knob down into Gatlinburg the next day or the next night to Icewater. There is a shelter past Icewater that you can consider. And then going to Tri-Corner, which is a great shelter, you guys. And if you are a 6,000-footer peak bagger, there's 2 or 3 peaks that you could bag right around Tri-Corner. And then going from Tri-Corner to Cosby Knob shelter, and then Cosby Knob out of the park. So this is just an itinerary that I have followed, and it works for me. So going from Molly's Ridge to Derrick Knob, and then after Derrick Knob, a resupply, depending on if you're going to get off at Klingman's Dome or Newfound, and then Icewater, Tri-Corner, and Cosby Knob, and then out of the park. And you can twist that into a 6 or 7 day itinerary, depending on how long you spend down absorbing everything that you can think of down in Gatlinburg. Or if you're going to split your trip up and say you're going to do it in 2 separate legs, so to speak. One summer, you're going to do Molly's Ridge, Derrick Knob, and you're going to get out at Newfound Gap. And then you're going to come back and go Icewater, Tri-Corner, Cosby Knob. Or it is possible to start at Newfound Gap and go Newfound Gap to Tri-Corner and then out to Cosby Knob and then out of the park. So once you get your dollar map, it's got all the shelters all there. It's got everything that you need. But that itinerary seems to work. It's not overly aggressive. You're not going to kill yourself. And it does allow you time to enjoy the park and absorb everything that the Great Smoky Mountains Park has to offer. And I will say, if you're going to be a one and done, I would take your time and I would go through the park and I would enjoy what the park has to offer. And 3 of those things, 3 of my favorite things that I don't want you guys to miss are the fire towers. On the Appalachian Trail, there are 3 fire towers. The first one you're going to come to going north is Shuckstack. It is about 4.5 miles into your trek once you enter the park. There's a little trick about getting to Shuckstack. There's no sign for it. About the 4-mile mark, the AT is going to make a sharp left-hand turn, and there is a side trail not marked that takes you up to Shuckstack Tower. And I do recommend doing that. I think on Far Out, it's probably marked at this point on how to get to Shuckstack. I would imagine there is some notation in there. And you guys, the first time I went to Shuckstack, I love fire towers, but I am afraid of heights. And it took all I had to climb that tower. It is so rickety, I'm telling you. But you can get up in there and to look out and look down and see Fontana Dam. It is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So I do recommend that. And then obviously Klingman's Dome. And before you get to Klingman's Dome, the day before, I forgot to put this on the list here, is a place called Rocky Top. And if you're on Rocky Top on a clear day, and this is before, this is going to be your 2nd or 3rd day out, you're going to hit Rocky Top, and then you're going to hit Thunder Ridge. Rocky Top, I mean, I was blown away. You can stand on Rocky Top and look south. I'm going to put my hands up here. You're looking south. And on your left-hand side, you can see Fontana Dam. And on your right-hand side, on a clear day, you can see Cades Cove. I didn't realize what I was looking at the first time I was up there. And a gentleman was up there, and I was like, man, it is so gorgeous down there. I wonder what that is. And he said, that's Cades Cove. So you guys, when you're on Rocky Top, before you hit Thunder Ridge, you've got to turn around, because if you're hiking north, you got to turn around and look back. and you'll see Fontana Dam and you'll see Cades Cove. And it is absolutely amazing, amazing. I mean, I wish I was there right now. So after that, you've got Klingman's Dome. And I want to make sure I don't miss anything here. After Klingman's Dome, you've got some awesome places. After Klingman's Dome, you have a place called the Jump Off. So once you go through Klingman's Dome and once you go through Newfound Gap, about 3 or 4 miles at the turnoff to go to Mount LeConte, mark this down. So at the turnoff to go to Mount LeConte, if you follow the trail that goes to Mount LeConte, not that far off of the AT, there is a sign that says the Jump Off. You want to go up there, trust me. It is 0.6 of a side trail. It's straight up, so get ready. And literally, you'll be on this trail, and I think it's over 6,000 feet, and the trail just stops. It's called the Jump Off for a reason, and when you get to that point, you'll know it because there's nowhere else for you to go. But then if you get to that point and you slightly turn to the right, you will see Charlie's Bunion from a different perspective. So it's a really cool place to go. Not a lot of people go up there, and it's not far off of the AT. So when you've gone through Newfound Gap and you see the turnoff to go to Mount LeConte, look for the sign that says the Jump Off. And it's definitely worth it. And then you're going to hit the other famous place in the Smokies. Everybody talks about Charlie's Bunion. And yes, it is amazing. It is wonderful. And those are the highlights for me. I'm sure plenty of people have other highlights out there. And as you're going north past Charlie's Bunion in your last couple days coming out of the park, you're going to hit that last fire tower, which is Mount Camerer. You guys, it might be my favorite fire tower of all time. It is 0.6 off of the Appalachian Trail. And you're going to hit this on your last day when you're going out of the park. You're going to be tired. You're going to be exhausted. And you're going to be like, nah, I'm not sure I want to go up there. If the weather's good, go up there. If the weather's good, go up there. Because, you guys, this tower, when you get up there, it sits on this tiny edge. You feel like you're on the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And you can actually go in the tower. One of my traditions when I go up there, I always like to go in the tower, make hot coffee, have a snack, hang out up there. And you can walk 360 around the tower, and you can really see north on the Appalachian Trail. You can see Snowbird Mountain, you can see Max Patch, and you can see to the east in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You can actually see another tower, Mount Sterling. I was going to say, I can't remember the name of it. If you are looking towards Snowbird when you're at the tower, which is Max Patch, and then you look out to your right, you can see Mount Sterling. And I've been up to Mount Sterling. That is another amazing fire tower in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And it is incredible, you guys. The Smokies, when you go, please, please, please absorb everything they have to offer. Plan it in your itinerary that you are going to spend some time up in these fire towers and take advantage of the views and the scenery, especially on these gorgeous days, if there are gorgeous days in the Smokies. And, take that into consideration when you plan to go through the Smokies. I have actually been through the Smokies in the fall. And I will say, in the fall, you get all the views. The leaves are off the trees, and it's just a different experience. I could go on and on, but I won't. I think you guys know how I feel about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and in general about the Southern Appalachians. And before I end here, before I wrap up, if there are any questions or any comments that you guys want to put in the chat, go ahead and do that now. I want to talk about clothing and being prepared as you go through the Smokies. There is not a time, not a season, not a weather avenue that I have not gone in the Smokies with my pack a little bit heavier with clothing to accommodate the weather. So you have to keep in mind, no matter what season that you're going to go through the Smokies, when you're up there on the Appalachian Trail, you are at 5,000, 6,000 feet elevation, even at night. So once you get up there from that first day, no matter what end of the park you start on, In Fontana, it could be sunny and 80 degrees. And when you get to Molly's Ridge, it could be 45, raining and sleeting. Doesn't matter what time of year you go through. People, you need your 10 essentials. You need your rain gear. You need your puffy coat. You need your hat. You need your gloves. And you need to be very, very cautious about your clothing, because I have run into situations where hikers show up to those shelters, you guys, and they are not prepared. Like I said, it was 80, 85 degrees down in Fontana when we started, and you're sweating all day to get up to that first shelter. And if you're not prepared with a separate change of clothes, your night clothes, your wool, different pair of socks, you've always got to be able to get warm. And that is the thing you have to think about. And I've got an entire episode on that, on preparing for different clothing, different weather, different situations. And I will say that it is the same thing when you go through the Whites in New Hampshire. You have got to be prepared to get warm, because where you start, the temperature where you start is not going to be the temperature that you're hanging out in until you come down the mountain 6 or 7 days later. And within the checklist, I put this back out here again. I've got several episodes, you guys, on hiker safety, 10 essentials, various gear lists. And I just did not want to end the episode without saying 1,000,000%, you have got to go through the Smoky Mountains prepared with your itinerary, your clothing, your 10 essentials. And if you do that, you're going to have an amazing time, and you're not going to have to worry about stuff. So keep that in mind, you guys. I truly appreciate it. These episodes, I really, really enjoy doing. And I truly hope that they help each and every one of you that are listening or watching be successful. And like I said, if you are not watching the live version and you have questions, please, please, please put those questions in the comment section. I will be more than glad to answer those. This is the way that, a better way that I can communicate with all of you. And that is through the comment section over on YouTube. And you guys, it's been fun. So Stella says, great info. Thanks. Not a problem, Stella. Again, go to the description. I've got a playlist of these episodes. You'll have access to all the checklist. I really appreciate it, you guys. These are amazing episodes. We're going to be live next with section hiking through the Shenandoahs. And I love the Shenandoahs too. Don't tell anybody, I'm thinking about going through the Shenandoahs again this summer. And that'll be my third time going through the Shenandoahs, just because I love it so much. The ease of campsites and the way you get through the Shenandoahs. I just love it. All right, you guys, as always, thanks for listening. Be safe out there, everybody, and happy section hiking.
Wells Fargo presents one of the surest ways to grow your money. A Wells Fargo CD account, where you can earn a 5.00% annual percentage yield on an 11-month term with a minimum opening deposit of $5,000. Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/CD rates to open a CD account and start growing your savings with us.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.